24 Israeli soldiers killed in Gaza in a single day and 195 Palestinians. Israel's assault against Hamas has apparently stalled, and now the UK and the US are again bombing rebels in Yemen. Self-defense or self-interest? And are we being dragged into a long, protracted war? Tonight, we witness the Israeli families burying their dead and hear live from those still waiting for hostages to come home. While inside Gaza, we capture the aftermath of another Israeli airstrike and see the reality of life for tens of thousands trapped in a war zone. The UK and the US claim they bombed Yemen in response to a growing threat. We'll ask how effective this latest action could be. And if this is just about safeguarding the global economy, why shouldn't leaders act to protect the pound in your pocket? This evening, I'll be joined by our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, who's reported extensively from Yemen. And coming up, it's Trump versus Haley in New Hampshire, as voters choose who they want to be their Republican presidential nominee. And the Oscars nominations are out. Oppenheimer dominates and Barbie is snubbed in some major categories, as last year's biggest box office hits look to break a trend that's lasted 2 decades. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. How do you measure success in a war? I asked that question because last night the UK and the US launched airstrikes targeting Houthi rebels who are hijacking vessels and disrupting trade in the Red Sea. Yes, these are the same rebels who release Hollywood-style videos of fighters descending onto container ships, and the very same ones who have grown in strength despite a concerted bombing campaign by Saudi Arabia that lasted almost 9 years. So what are the UK and the US actually trying to achieve? And is their escalation justified? Especially because Israel's war in Gaza is becoming increasingly deadly. Today, we filmed at the funeral of one of 24 soldiers killed in a single day. And in Gaza, our team witnessed the chaotic aftermath of an Israeli strike. 195 people were killed there in the last 24 hours. That's according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Tonight, I'll ask the families of 2 hostages still being held whether their government should change its approach and make a deal with Hamas. Let's get started with a report from our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who's in Jerusalem. And a warning, you'll see images of injured adults and children coming up.
109 days of war has turned this land into a place of continuous mourning. Israel's cost can be counted in the newly filled graves at the country's military cemetery on Mount Herzl in the hills of Jerusalem. Today, as the rains came down, another soldier was buried by his comrades. Hada Kapoluk was one of the 24 reservists killed in Gaza yesterday. Israel's deadliest day since the ground operation began. He was 23 years old. In Israel and in Gaza, there is not one family left untouched by a war whose aims are clear, but outcome is not. Does this change your thoughts on the war in any way?
It's a hard question, but I think the only thing I can say for sure that now more than ever, I feel that we as Jews don't have any other place to go. That's our home, and we have no other place to live in and to stay in. And this is why our brothers, our cousins are fighting for this country.
As one funeral finished, they were preparing the ground for the next. The certainty of more deaths, bleakly underlined by the many graves that have already been dug but are yet to be filled. Although this event is unlikely to be a turning point in the war in and of itself, as well as Israel's growing military death toll, more than 4,500 soldiers have been wounded in the fighting, and there are more than 130 hostages still being held inside Gaza.
And that certainly is putting pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli War Cabinet.
The IDF says it has surrounded Khan Yunis, and the fighting there has intensified in the last 24 hours. As our team was filming south of the city today, an Israeli airstrike hit a camp nearby. An injured man raises his head from the floor, but seems unable to move his legs. This baby girl, limp in her father's arms but still alive, is missing a large part of her lower back. As the team goes towards the fire, there's a secondary explosion. We don't know why this camp was targeted, but many of the injured and dead were clearly children. Tens of thousands of civilians are again trapped in the firing line, or now desperately fleeing the battle. They're not heading for safety, though. They're walking towards more uncertainty, towards new risks. Trapped in a war zone that they cannot escape, and at the mercy of fate. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Well, I want to talk about Britain's role in this conflict because let's not beat around the bush. The UK is now playing a part. Last night, RAF jets joined their US counterparts and launched airstrikes on Houthi sites in Yemen. It was the second such operation after previous airstrikes on rebel targets 11 days ago that were described as a, quote, success. But given the Houthis didn't back down afterwards and we've just seen a second wave of strikes, what sort of success is that? Let's try to get a better sense of what's happening out in the Red Sea. Here's our international affairs editor, Dominique Waghorn.
As many as 30 munitions were fired at targets in Yemen from British and American warplanes, the second time UK forces have been involved. The mission to degrade and deter the Houthis' ability to menace shipping in the Red Sea.
We urge the Houthis and those who enable them to stop these illegal and unacceptable attacks.
Leaders in London and Washington say this is all about self-defence and protecting international shipping. The British and Americans say that military action is necessary to protect one of the world's most vital shipping routes through the Red Sea and to keep open this potential choke point that has been menaced by the Houthis. 2 weeks ago, a cluster of targets were hit by US-British airstrikes in the Houthi-held west of Yemen. And last night, the jets were back, hitting a smaller number of locations, what the military say were underground Houthi missile storage bunkers and air surveillance assets. Now, 30% of global shipping passes through this route. That's everything from agricultural goods to consumer goods to fuel, making up 15% of world trade. Now, instead of going through the Red Sea, much of it is going all the way around the continent of Africa, massively raising the cost of shipping, insurance and increasing prices that is all being passed on to us as consumers. But there are doubts about how effective this action will be and why it's happening. The Prime Minister told the Commons this has nothing to do with the Gaza war.
Mr. Speaker, I repeat that there is no link between our actions of self-defence in the Red Sea and the situation in Israel and Gaza. Those who make that link do the Houthis work for them.
But there's no doubt this is linked to escalating tensions coming from the Gaza conflict. The Houthis say they're acting in solidarity with the people of Gaza. Analysts say it's disingenuous to suggest there's no connection.
A far more promising and feasible means of dealing with this threat is, number one, pulling the plug on the Israeli assault on Gaza. This is the Americans who are in the position to do that. And number two, convening regional diplomacy to de-escalate this whole situation. That's got far more of a chance of dealing with the threats to shipping in the Red Sea and the threat that poses to the global economy. But clearly the British and Americans are sufficiently committed to Israel's war in Gaza that that's off the table.
So far, the Houthis seem far from deterred, upping the ante tonight in this letter ordering all British and American aid workers to leave the country within a month. The fear is the airstrikes will escalate the situation without stopping the Houthis' attacks on shipping. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
Well, let's cross to Sana'a now and speak to a journalist who has worked extensively in Houthi-controlled areas, Yusuf Mari. Yusuf, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. We've heard in the last 24 hours from the United States, from the UK. They've described these strikes as successful. They've said it sent a clear message to the Houthis. Has it?
Well, it's successful in the sense that instead of just the Ansar Allah Houthis taking up arms against the US and the UK, you now have an entire population, an entire nation, taking up arms and joining in with the Ansar Allah Houthis to counter what they perceive to be an unjust US and UK aggression on Yemen, mainly because the Ansar Allah Houthis' effort is well believed to be in support of the Palestinian people, a cause which is dear to the hearts of all Yemenis, not just those who follow Ansar Allah and the Houthis, but all Yemenis, including the internal factions in Yemen who oppose the Ansar Allah Houthis. So I can tell you that in terms of what these military operations have achieved, they really haven't destroyed any of the ballistic missile launching sites. They haven't destroyed any of the fighter jets possessed by the Ansar Allah Houthis, and they haven't really targeted or damaged any of the radars, which are used to guide the unmanned drones, which target Israeli ships in the Red Sea. And
Yusuf, you say it hasn't really, made any kind of dent or impacted anything. But if anything, it's boosted their popularity. Over the last few weeks, we've seen hundreds of thousands of people come out onto the streets in support of the Houthis. This is in many ways a gift for the Houthis, isn't it? It's sort of like a dream come true where they can take on the big superpower. They've dragged the United States and the UK into this.
Well, it's not just tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who are taken to the streets. It's millions of Yemenis who are taken to the streets, which is an indication that these, the Houthi Ansar Allah stance with the Palestinian people, these military operations in the Red Sea are a dear sentiment shared by the vast majority of the Yemeni people. So when it in terms of that, this has been used as an advantage point for the Ansar Allah Houthis, I think it has gained them a lot of popularity. It has garnished and gathered a lot of support. And I think people, not just in Yemen, but across the Middle East, are gravitating towards the military objectives and the political...
Yusuf, I'm just going to interrupt you because, of course, the Houthis say that this is in support of the Palestinians and the situation in Gaza. But there are several layers of motivation here. I mean, some of the ships that they are targeting have nothing to do with the war in Gaza or any thing that's happening, between Israel and Hamas. I mean, just yesterday, for example, the Houthis prevented Sudanese planes carrying Yemeni civilians from landing in Mocha. The Red Sea seaports, airports in Yemen have all been hostage to the Houthis for years.
Well, the Ansar Allah Houthis have mentioned that their military objectives in the Red Sea are against the Israeli-linked ships that are transaction and exporting and importing goods, any type of supplies to Israel, or what they call the occupied Palestinian territories. In terms of the ship that was headed towards the port of Al-Mukha, they believe that this was a ship that was carrying weapons to the factions that are on the ground being supported and financed by Western powers like the US and like the UK from their military bases in Djibouti. So I can't really confirm whether this was an Israeli-linked ship or not, but according to the Ansar Allah Houthis, they feel that their military operations was justified because of the reason that they claim these ships are, they have intentions of hostile actions against the Ansar Allah Houthi movement. So these military operations, according to the Ansar Allah Houthis, will continue. Their main objective, their main targets in the Red Sea are the Israeli-linked ships and now the U.S. ships, and ships also in the Red Sea. They will continue to target them according to the Ansar Allah Houthis, despite these military actions by the U.S.
Okay. Yusuf Murray, thank you very much for joining us, a journalist speaking to us live there from Sana'a. Well, let's bring in our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, who, of course, has done a huge amount of work in Yemen. You've interviewed and spent time with the Houthis as well, Alex, and we'll get to that. But first of all, I wanted to begin by asking you about this letter that Sky News has seen from the Houthi-controlled Foreign Affairs Ministry. British and American aid workers have been asked to leave Yemen by the Houthi authorities.
Well, actually, they sent a letter to the UN saying that all UK and USA passport holders need to leave, and they want them to leave immediately. It was a very respectful letter, but they made it clear, I think, just by delivering that letter, that anyone who's British or American is unwelcome in that country at the moment, and primarily, that might specifically affect aid workers. The whole of the UN aid operation is based in the north of Yemen, controlled by Houthi. Most of the NGOs and the aid agencies that deliver crucial humanitarian aid are based in the north, because that's the area that's most at risk and in need of humanitarian aid. So they have showed not only that they're not cowed by any threats or any strikes from
They've said go.
Yeah, they've said, you know what, we don't really care. And Yusuf was absolutely right that they are linking it 100% to the bombardment, the Israeli bombardment of Gaza. And to be honest, they don't really care whether the ships are particularly linked to Israel or delivering weapons or anything to Israel. They have got what they wanted, which is worldwide attention of not only themselves, but also the situation in Gaza. And you saw those pictures in Alistair Bunkle's report of how critical the situation is, with the Israeli military upping the ante themselves and suffering terrible consequences, with 24 IDF soldiers killed in one day, and hundreds of Palestinians, civilians, being killed over the past 24 hours as well. So as far as the Houthis is concerned, this is a win-win-win situation
for them. And when Yusuf Murray says there are frankly not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but millions of Yemenis. I mean, the fact is, when you think about what has happened in Yemen over the last 8 years, you know, the sort of war crimes that the Houthis have been accused of, they're not a very popular group, even amongst their own population. But this moment has not only meant that the international community is speaking about them, but actually millions of Yemenis and people across the Arab world are supporting them.
This is the turning point for them. They are suddenly in with the big boys, if you like. They're being talked about by global politicians all over the world. They have managed to turn themselves, not just sort of originally, if you think, to 2014 or 8 years ago or whatever, that they were basically a ragtag army. They're now a really big fighting military force, hard-wearing, because they've taken on, for the past 8-10 years, the big coalition of Saudi Arabia, UK, USA and UAE. And now they're fighting for a cause which is immensely popular in Yemen. I mean, it really can't be understated. They're not just in Yemen, but they're now being seen as the group that's taking on the whole, USA and UK and everyone who's supporting Israel. And that's large sections of the world, not just the Muslim world, but also the global south. So this is hugely popular for them and proving very popular propaganda for them. It's not very good for the rest of the world and the resulting, are we going to be able to create peace here? And that's why you're seeing a really increased diplomacy. We've seen a lot of shuttle diplomacy, and we're going to see a lot over the next few days. We know British Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron is heading to the region over the next few days. So all the key players are taking part in big negotiations behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to try and broker a permanent ceasefire. Turkey is playing a big part in this, having lots of negotiations with Hamas, saying that Hamas are ready to do a deal. They're ready to have release all the hostages to allow humanitarian aid in so long as there's a ceasefire. Israel at the moment is saying we don't want to have a ceasefire until the hostages are released. And that is what the diplomats are trying to sort out right now.
And we, in a moment, will be speaking to some of the families of the hostages. But Alex, thank you so much for your reporting and for all of your analysis here. Now stay with me, because coming up I'll be speaking, as I said, to the relatives of 3 hostages still being held by Hamas. 109 days since the attack on southern Israel. I'll ask the families if they agree with the way world leaders, including their Prime Minister, are going about trying to return the men, women and children still being held in Gaza.
Well, we've been doing them for years, to be fair. And we fill them with slow braised beef brisket, toad in the oils, vegetarian toads, lamb shanks. Well, anything that will go in there with gravy, to be fair. But yeah, the secret is a great mix. The oven's got to be set at 210 degrees. That's the way we tried and tested it. And we basically use a cake tin. And well, they don't always come out perfect, but we try as best. Oh, they do get a little soggy bottom sometimes, to be fair. It depends how big they are, if you know what I mean. But once you put the gravy in anyway, they're always going to get a soggy bottom, aren't they, love? I've had so many messages of people. I'm not sure if anybody's actually got here yet, but I've had people from Leeds, Bristol, you name it, everywhere, wanting to come and have them. To be fair, it's been a local dish for years, because I've been here for 15 years, and there's so many people had them over the years. We used to have a pan in the pub, but we've got rid of that, and I used to say our famous toad in the oil. So, yeah, I'm actually overwhelmed with how many people have just been contacting us, and obviously social media has just gone a little bit crazy, to be fair.
Welcome back. Israel has refused to confirm reports it could be willing to pause fighting in Gaza for 2 months in return for the release of all its hostages. More than 130 people are believed to be still held by Hamas after being kidnapped on October the 7th. Well, with me is Ziv Aboud, girlfriend of Leah Cohen, who was kidnapped when Hamas fighters stormed the Nova Music Festival, and Liran Berman, brother of twins Ziv and Gali, who were taken from their house in southern Israel on October the 7th. Thank you both very much for joining us here on the programme. Ziv, in fact, you yourself were there at the music festival when your boyfriend was taken away.
Yes, I was with him actually in the party, and with my nephew that murdered in October 7 in this shelter that Elia was kidnapped from. this is a sad story because maybe I'm here and I'm strong now for Elia because we really want to bring them home. But what it was in October 7 was terrified. I don't know how I am here, but our story is very, very sad because I was there. I see what they do to us. They shot us. They throw grenades, 9 grenades to our shelter. They want to murder us. They don't come to fight army against army. They want to murder civilians, people in Israel.
It's been 109 days. In fact, there was a moment of hope when we saw some hostages released. I was there in Jerusalem, and you could feel the pain on all sides, but actually the relief, but also the conflicted feeling that many people had as some of their families came out, but then there were others who were left behind.
We were happy for all the families that got their loved one back. But on the other hand, we are still waiting. So it was a bittersweet moment. And now we are pushing for a second deal. We need our loved one here. I need my little brothers home. Ziv needs her partner home.
Yeah, your twin brothers
Yes.
have been held there. Yesterday, we saw some hostage families storm the Knesset and, scream that those inside, members of the war cabinet, members of the government, members of the Knesset are traitors for leaving these people behind. Is that how you feel?
I can't blame them. And maybe if I was there, I would have done the same. No one can feel what we feel. No one can understand the suffering of, you say, 109 days. Our life stopped on October 7th. So we don't count the days. So I can understand them. It's frustrating. It's frustrating that we had a deal. Some hostages got back, but our loved ones are still there.
I mean, what do you want the government, your Prime Minister, to do? Because there's now a lot of criticism around the Prime Minister, accusations that he's not doing enough, he's not striking a deal. Even though there are deals on the table, he's sort of refusing to accept it.
It's not really true because we appreciate the job that he do. But we need more pressure, not just from Israel government. We need the world pressure because it's not just issues of Israeli. It's not just this. In October 7, they don't murder just Jews. They murder also Muslims. In my shelter, it was a Muslim. They say, I'm Muslim, and they shot him. So it's not just Israeli conflict, it's world conflict.
There is growing international pressure for a ceasefire, for an end to this conflict, which will result perhaps in the hostage release. Certainly that has been thrown around, but we continue to hear that the Israeli government is saying, well, we don't want a ceasefire. Do you think a ceasefire would result in the release of the hostages?
Yes and no. Yes, we saw that the last ceasefire bring back the hostages. But everyone needs to remember that on October 6th, there was a ceasefire. We didn't want this conflict. We didn't start this conflict. On October 6th, there was a ceasefire, and on October 7th, more than 1,000 terrorists entered Israel in the intent to kill, rape, behead, burn, destroy Israel. They didn't come as freedom fighters. They didn't come as liberators. They came to kill. So we will take a ceasefire now, humanitarian ceasefire, and to release our loved ones. But there need to be an end to Hamas govern of Gaza because the Palestinians are suffering because of Hamas.
And yet today we have also seen, alongside the high death toll on the Palestinian side, we've also now seen Israeli soldiers, 24 Israeli soldiers were killed. That, is a total of 291 now killed. Do you want this war to end, regardless of whether Hamas remains or not?
Of course, we want the war to end. Like I said, we didn't ask for it. We want to live in coexistence with the Palestinians, with the Muslims inside Israel. We didn't want this war. Every war is terrible. There are a lot of casualties, a lot of civilian casualties, a lot of friends of us who are in the IDF who got killed. So, of course, we want this to end. Nobody wants to live in conflict, nobody.
Also, me thinks that we want the war to stop. We don't want civilians. People will die in both of the sides. We don't ask for this war, but that's what happened, you know. So we need to fight for our love. And if all the hostages will
be released,
will be released, so the war is stop.
Yeah.
But, you know, I spoke to a member of the Knesset yesterday who said the Israeli people are looking for results. Are you satisfied with what you're seeing right now, how things are developing?
We are not political people. We are ordinary people who got caught in this craziness. We just want our loved one back. I don't want to be in the in the decision makers' shoes. I know that they don't want to be in my shoes, of course not. But we are not coming from politics. We don't know what going on into the decision making. So we hope that they are doing their best to end this conflict and return our loved ones.
What would you like to now see? Obviously, you want to see your boyfriend come back and for Liran, for his brothers to return.
Can you...
you know, you obviously now just want your loved ones back.
Yes.
If you can just tell me a little bit more about your feelings.
It's been 109 days of nightmare. We are living in a horror movie that we can't pause or stop or replace the movie. It's a roller coaster of emotion, mostly on the bad side of the emotions. I think Ziv can agree with me. We are tired all the time. We are worried all the time.
Except my feelings about what I have been passed on October 7. I need to handle with Elia and what happened to Elia and fight for him. And except of this, my family also I lose my nephew. I see him in front of my eyes, murder, and I lay with his body for 6 hours. So it's very hard for me to be here, but I'm doing the job because we want support of the world because we need it.
And just to pick up on that point, I mean, you were lying there amongst dead bodies when they took Elia away.
Yes. Actually, after they took Elia, they come to the shelter again to finish the job. They take a gun and start shoot everybody. I don't know, like I said before, how I'm here, but I sit with more than 16 bodies in front of me for 6 hours.
Well, we're really grateful that you've joined us. I know it's very difficult and a very deeply emotional time. Ziv Aboud and Liran Berman, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, could Donald Trump soon be crowned as the Republican nominee? These are live pictures from Derry in New Hampshire, where voters are currently making their choice. I'll be asking a Republican senator whether the party will unite behind the former president. Welcome back. Let's cross to the United States now and focus on New Hampshire. Republican voters are deciding who they want to take on Joe Biden in November's presidential election. It's now a straight choice between former US President Donald Trump and the former US Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley. So could Donald Trump be crowned as his party's candidate of choice in the next few hours? Here's our US correspondent, James Matthews.
5, 4, 3, 2.
In New Hampshire, they know a thing or two about the race. Momentum. And finishing first and fast. Nikki Haley versus Donald Trump. Where's your support?
Well, I'm an independent, but I'm going to vote in the Republican primary, and I'm going to vote for Nikki Haley.
Why?
Because I want no part of Donald Trump.
Trump, all the way. There's a lot of corruption going on lately, a lot of things that shouldn't be happening in this world, and I'm very sad for our children's futures if this continues.
Not with Trump, ever.
Why?
He's a felon, up on felony charges.
Here the bell sounded for round 2.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
You too.
Of voting in the Republican primary. The knockout round, potentially.
I'm running against Donald Trump, and I'm not going to talk about an obituary just because y'all think we have to talk about it.
Nikki Haley, the last standing contender to Donald Trump, is behind in the polls. This is a contest on the verge of a coronation.
Is New Hampshire make or break for you? Is this make or break for you?
Making it or breaking it for Team Haley depends on a strong showing here.
So is it ultimately about staying in the race long enough for Donald Trump's legal troubles to encroach on his political ambition?
No, look, if you're waiting for legal troubles or something external to take down Donald Trump, that's not going to happen. You beat him in the ballot box. That's democracy.
In New Hampshire, it's an old story. Who in the Republican movement can take on Donald Trump? This is the city of Manchester. From a local HQ opposite a thrift shop, campaigners for a former president, used once, have seen him highlight his rival's Indian heritage. Dog whistle or not, their tails are up.
Now we're down to 2 people. And I think one person will be gone probably tomorrow. And the other one will be gone in November.
New Hampshire is as good as it gets for Nikki Haley. 40% of those voting in this primary are moderates, independents, the alternative to Trump crowd that she covets. Realistically, if she can't make it here, she can't make it anywhere. James Matthews, Sky News, in New Hampshire.
Well, some of Donald Trump's rivals for the nomination dropped out of the race in recent days and quickly became his backers. So will the Republican Party unite behind him? I'm joined now by Ron Johnson, Republican Senator for Wisconsin. Thank you so much, Senator, for joining us here on the program. You're one of Donald Trump's most vocal allies. Why won't you endorse him?
I just don't endorse candidates. I leave that up to the Republican primary voters, and once they've made their decision, I'll support that nominee.
And are you confident that, if you believe the polls and everything that's been happening over the last week since the Iowa caucus, it will be Donald Trump who will be the nominee?
It looks that way. I mean, this is Nikki Haley's best chance in New Hampshire and in her home state of South Carolina. You've got a lot of crossover voters in an open primary, independents, potentially Democrats that want to defeat Donald Trump. So this is her best chance tonight. And if she stays in South Carolina, if she can't get it done there, probably doesn't have much of a chance.
I mean, it's one thing getting the Republican Party nomination. It's another getting to the White House. I mean, 9 months is a long time in politics.
It is. I'm certainly hoping that Americans have their eyes open to the disaster that Democrat governance has been. I've often said if you were asked to develop a strategy to destroy this country, you'd be very hard-pressed to come up with a better game plan than Joe Biden is implementing. The open borders, which are a clear and present danger to our nation, 40-year high inflation, a dollar you held at the start of the Biden administration is only worth 85 cents, a war on fossil fuel, contributing to inflation, the dangerous and embarrassing surrender in Afghanistan that has emboldened our enemies and, quite honestly, set the world aflame. So Democrat governance, the Biden administration, has been a disaster for America. Hopefully the news, mainstream media here in America will start covering it more honestly and stop covering up for Joe Biden.
Well, Senator, let's talk about the bipartisan border security bill. You want no more funding for Ukraine without tighter security on the borders. Is that bill going to go through?
We'll see. The difficult thing that Republican negotiators are dealing with is they're dealing with the president, they're dealing with the Democrats in Congress here that want an open border, that caused the problem. This isn't a problem that just fell into Joe Biden's lap. He took a largely secure border and he blew it wide open. He reversed all the successful policies that President Trump.
But is it right to politicize and hold Ukraine hostage effectively?
It's the only leverage we have for addressing what I think is the top priority of America, is keeping Americans safe, securing our border before we secure Ukraine's. Listen, I'm highly sympathetic. I think most Americans are sympathetic with the freedom-loving people of Ukraine. We all think Vladimir Putin is a war criminal. But we also have to make sure that we secure our own homeland. And if this is the only leverage we have, and apparently this is it, we should use that leverage. I've suggested making Ukraine funding contingent on Joe Biden actually hitting thresholds, metrics of securing the border, because he's a lawless president. He doesn't abide by Supreme Court rulings. He actually wanted an open border. He caused the problem. And that's a real conundrum for Republicans to have to deal with.
I'm just going to show our viewers some images that we got overnight from Ukraine, where we saw a barrage of Russian missiles in Kiev and in Kharkiv, as well as a number of other places. I mean, you say that Americans are sympathetic, but do you think under a Donald Trump presidency, a Trump 2.0, there will be support for Ukraine?
Well, first of all, understand that Vladimir Putin will not lose this war. Losing the war is existential to Vladimir Putin. He's got nuclear weapons. The only way this ends is a negotiated settlement. Every day that goes by, the settlement, as much as we're going to hate it, it gets worse and worse as more Ukrainians die, more Russian conscripts die. I take no joy in that. And more of Ukraine gets destroyed. So any action we take should be directed toward bringing Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table to end this thing. But you just showed pictures, apparently, of Ukraine. You ought to show the invasion of America in our southern border. The 6 million people have been let in since Joe Biden. 2 million as gotaways. We have no idea who these people are. With Hamas creating its atrocities, calling for days of rage, as an American, we're pretty concerned about foreign fighters coming in through our completely open southern border.
OK, we'll have to leave it there, Senator Ron Johnson. Thank you very much for joining us here on the programme.
Have a good day.
Well, with me here in the studio tonight, the co-founder of Tortoise Media and former director of BBC News, James Harding, and the author and columnist at Spiked magazine, Ella Whelan. Thank you both for joining us here on the programme. James, good to see you. And we're just hearing there from Senator Ron Johnson, a staunch supporter of Donald Trump, giving us a bit of a flavour of what a Trump 2.0 might look like.
Well, you start to hear some of the language. And, you know, just watching your show, Yalda, you can't help feeling for viewers who think to themselves, wow, the world is a really uncertain and dangerous place. You know, Israel, Gaza, what's happening with the Houthis in the Red Sea, a hard story to understand. And then you hear the language of Senator Johnson, an invasion on the southern border of the United States. I think it's really important just to pause and understand what's likely to be coming our way in the next 24 hours. If, as predicted, Donald Trump wins the New Hampshire primary, if Nikki Haley doesn't win and therefore looks like she's on her way out, we have a period, a very long run of uncertainty coming our way. We won't know who's going to be the president of the United States, but there is a good deal of fear baked in. Fear for Ukraine. Is there going to be long-term US backing? And if not, where does that leave Europe? Because Europe has staked its credibility and integrity on making sure that Kyiv wins and Vladimir Putin's forces are pushed back. And of course, a bigger question, which is, what does the rest of the world make of democracy? What does it read into the rule of law and truth in the media?
I'm going to bring in Ella because we are going to hear a lot over the course of the next 9 months and then beyond. Catastrophizing of what's going on around the world, the end of democracy, the end of American leadership. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think democracy is in a perilous situation, and its big enemies are not sort of who they're portrayed to be. It's not just Trump, even though he has done a lot to damage democracy with his sort of calling into question of elections and his bad behaviour over the last few years. But I think we have a much bigger existential crisis, which is to look at the fact that from, in particular in America, the Democrats have done their own sort of disservice to democracy over the years. I don't think we can underestimate the damage that Russiagate did to sort of trust in politics, trust in the media, and the reason why we are at this sort of Groundhog Day situation where you have the potential of a Trump presidency, which is not good by any stretch of the imagination. I think actually it's interesting that even Trump supporters are saying, well, we know he's got a lot of downsides, to put it lightly, but we hate the establishment. We know the sort of the line they take now. And I think the reason why it's so disastrous that for Americans that we're at this Groundhog Day should make those of us who are commentators or people who have positions of political power internationally or elsewhere to resist the catastrophizing and to actually look at what happened throughout the Trump presidency. I mean, for all the talk of invasion and things like that, he never built the wall. I mean, actually, it was a sort of a list of failures.
He sort of attempted, but
it was a list of failures.
James, I mean, what Ella's saying, is the bumper sticker of a Trump 2.0 tragic, but not catastrophic?
So I worry about that. And also, I've got quite a sunny disposition. My nature is to say, you know what, it's not going to be so bad. I really worry about that when we talk about a second Donald Trump presidency, because I think there's a risk that people who spend their time thinking about this, who have access to Donald Trump and to Donald Trump's team, underestimate what the impact of that will be. So I mentioned Ukraine. Right? Europe has made it absolutely clear that it wants to back the democratically elected government of Ukraine against the illegal invasion. If the United States stops supporting Ukraine, that pits the US against Europe on a fundamental question of what we believe. Who do we stand behind? These are not small things. And Ella, I'd just say one thing about this comparison. Of course, US administrations over the years can all take the blame for, different failures, different, shortcomings. There is a really specific thing around the big lie of the election of 2020. A US president claiming that he won an election that he lost. Mm-hmm. The implications for that, I think, in this year, when whatever it is, 4 billion plus people go to the polls in one form or another, is a really significant one. People will draw the worst possible lessons from it.
I've got about a minute to go.
Well, it's very significant, and I think we have to ask, how did we get here? How did we get to the point at which Trump can, with such a brazen way, call into question a serious process of putting your ballot in the box? And we have to answer that the process of delegitimizing both the Brexit vote and the election through the Russiagate scandal in 2016, the mass hysteria from both the American elite and over here the British elite to rebellions at the ballot box has caused it damaged democracy, because you had across the water and here people saying votes don't count, we should reverse all the rest of it, and we won't rehash that row here because there's not enough time. But I think we have to be honest with ourselves and say that the biggest enemy to democracy and the biggest threat to democracy at the moment is not Trump. It's a sort of much more complicated picture of a political elite that is uneasy with its masses. The reason why Ukraine is so important is because it's a line in the sand for sovereignty. It's a very clear stand for democracy and sovereignty, which we failed to do in 2016 in our own domestic battles. So Ukraine perhaps is a moment to help us remember and realise how important sovereignty really is.
Ella, James, thank you so much.
Thanks, Yalda.
Thank you. Now, after the break, Oppenheimer leads the way. Christopher Nolan's epic picks up the most nominations, but no luck for Barbie's lead actress, Margot Robbie, or the film's director, despite raking in the most at the box office. Find out why next.